Welcome to our third and final roundtable on climate change and agriculture in the Middle East and North African region. We have had two roundtables before. The first one was in July. Just a recap for those of you joining us today. It was on agriculture and adaptation strategies in the Middle East and North African region. It was quite an insightful discussion. We have published a policy brief out of that. It's available both in English and Arabic on the GLD website, and also maybe at APS, Soha, yeah. Right, so that was the first roundtable. And then we had a second roundtable last month, which was quite lively on issues of climate change and justice and equity issues, which I think are going to be very important for the next couple of years. We are working on the policy brief out of that. It should be out in a couple of days or so. Again, just a recap that, you know, the series of this roundtable is a collaboration between GLD here at the University of Gothenburg and the APS at the University of Cairo, American University in Cairo. I keep mixing this up. We are missing two delegates or panelists, if you like. We're missing Nadim from the Issam Fares Institute at the American University in Beirut. They are one of the partners. We're also missing Professor Gumar from the University of Khartoum, but we're joined by Dr. Mohammed, it's from the University of Khartoum, Khalifa Zaid from the Sultan Qaboos University in Oman. Ayad is just joining. Ayad, you can hear us. Ayad is from the American University in Palestine. So just to give you you know, the way we do this roundtable is that we usually get the memos from the speakers, which kind of reflect the key issues in their respective countries. And we have got some of those memos which inform the discussion today. So if you've seen the post on the website, it kind of gives you a sense of what the discussion today is going to be like. That this is the region that faces, you know, acute water challenges. You know, it's very prone to desertification and land degradation. And as we say in the website, the topic today is very much part of the broader sustainable development framework for those who are following SDGs. So SDG 6 and 15, to be precise. So I don't want to get into more details, but I think the fact that we're missing two panelists, it's both good and bad. Good in the sense that I think we're going to probably get to hear more from Dr. Mohammed and Khalifa, because I think, again, we get some really interesting memos from both Oman and Sudan. And we should get started straight away. If we get to hear from the other two panelists later, that's fine. But I want to start, and just before, again, like Sarah reminded you, that if you have questions, those of you in the audience, feel free to post them in the chat and I will read them out in the middle of the discussion. So I will be posing a couple of questions to the audience, to the panelists rather, and then they'll react, and then we'll get started from there. So the first question is really this, you know, we want to get a picture, because I think we're hearing a lot of stories about the Middle East and North African region being the most critical region as far as water stress and water issues and land degradation is concerned. And we know this region is obviously not similar. Oman may have problems that are not probably the same as what happens in Sudan or a few other countries. So we want to get that kind of picture. You know, how big is this problem of water scarcity in the region? What is driving it? What are sort of like the country-specific challenges? If we could start with Sudan, with Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you, Jacob, for giving me this opportunity to discuss about water scarcity and land degradation in Sudan. Based on recent some work on desertification in Sudan, it is is highly subjected to land degradation. In the past, when it is one country, Sudan and South, out of 26 states, around 16 states are seriously affected by desertification. So I think the country in a broad sense is very affected by desertification and land degradation. On the other hand, regarding water, Sudan, although it is crossed by River Nile and it is tributaries, but away from the River Nile, there is shortage or water scarcity in some areas. So regarding the water, to some extent, the situation is need more elaboration, but in general, the country is affected and have some problems related with water. Whatever it is, availability of water itself or the ability of the people to access water resources. As you said, we will elaborate it more about this during this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Welcome Nadim and Ayad. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you, Thabit, because I was busy for defense master degree. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for making time. Just before we get to Alif and the rest, so we're just getting started, so you're not late at all. And I was asking the panelists to kind of give us a country-specific picture of how, acute this problem of land degradation and water scarcity is. And we've just had from Sudan, and we'll go to Oman next, and Lebanon, and then finally Palestine. So over to you, Khalifa.
Actually, because of Oman is a part of the subtropical area, so we are suffering from lack of rain and lack of water, and also the soil is poor in nutrient. So that's why actually we are facing a big problem in this issue, and one of the result of this problem in my country, we are import most of vegetables and fruit from outside. So because the land and water degradations, the food security actually in Oman is not suitable. So there is some solution and technique used by people and governments in Oman, but we still suffering from this problem actually, especially the lack of water. And in the coastline area, the salt water, it get inside, and then the groundwater is get affected by the salt. So by default, the agriculture is affected by this problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Alifa. We'll get to hear more of those, specific issues as we go by. Nadim, over to you. Give us a picture in Lebanon.
Yes, Lebanon is blessed with small size, if you will. And in that sense, we are a coastal Eastern Mediterranean country with mountains, two sets of mountain ranges running parallel to each other, north to south, paralleling the Mediterranean. So we've got one mountain range, the Mount Lebanon range, captures a lot of the moisture coming off the Mediterranean, and it's fairly lush and green. Then when you go to the leeward side, it becomes less green, but still gets enough rainfall. In between Mount Lebanon and the anti-Lebanon range is the Bakar Valley, which used to be a huge agricultural area, formerly known as the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, blah, blah, blah. That's history, it's gone. The Bakar, central Bakar region, which is, the Bakar is at an elevation of 700 meters plus above sea level. And it is very dry, typically because of the orographic effect. The northern part of the Bakar is the driest part in Lebanon. We get about 250 millimeters of rain there. I'm not giving this geography lesson, just for the hell of it. It's just that as climate is changing, as population is growing, precipitation first is being affected in terms of when. Temperature is rising and a lot of the snow that we're getting is gone. And people are expanding, urban expansion is unbelievable. If you want to talk about land degradation, it's not about, suitability of or arability of land or suitability for agriculture. It's the outright destruction of land by concrete expansion. And this is becoming rampant and uncontrolled. That's why the Bakar, I said, that's history, because it's now pockmarked with huge cities that are growing. 70% of the Lebanese live along the coast in cities, 80% live in metropolises. Northern Bakar is the most likely to face aridity or increased aridity because rainfall is getting less and less. As Khalifa mentioned, our problem with saline aquifer, saltwater intrusion along the coast, is depriving, especially north, starting from Tripoli southwards. Most of the cities there, the aquifers, the coastal aquifers there are becoming salty. And many areas around Beirut, which used to feed Beirut, are no longer agricultural lands, not because of urban expansion, which is part, it's because of the salinity of the water that's with which the agricultural lands being irrigated, nothing much is growing. If we go north into the mountains, the water table is dropping. We are facing more and more aridity and and the rainfall is becoming less and less. Not really, let me correct myself. The frequency of rain is shifting. The amount of rain is the same, but the frequency is shifting. And because we are building right next into the mountains, what's happening with the dryness and the high temperature and the proximity of households to forests, we are getting forest fires. Intentional forest fires, arson, or negligent forest fires. When these come, they destroy the ground cover on slope land, and the rain comes. Typically now we will start getting rains now. We are just through the forest season, if you will, because of the high dryness. When the rain comes on denuded slopes, land is, topsoil is lost, and we can no longer grow anything on those mountains, and they become barren. So this is the complex picture that we have. We have salinity maybe in some areas, topsoil erosion in others, urban sprawl, and aridity and closeness of desertification up. So we have a whole variety of issues to deal with. So I stop here, and I'm sorry if I spoke too much.
No, it's always good to get a full picture. Iyad, I don't know if you're comfortable. I can see it looks like you're driving.
Yes, I can talk a bit. I will stop right now to talk about Palestine.
Sure.
Okay, about Palestinian, according to the water consumption, we have around the Palestinian consume around 90 to 100 liters per capita per day. And as you know, it is less than the WHO standard. About the quantities, we have 3 aquifers in Palestine. We have the West Aquifer. It is include 362 million cubic meter, and we have Northeast. We're talking about 172 million cubic meter, and the East Aquifer, it is around 80 million cubic meter. But in the same time, all these aquifers in the West Bank in Palestine, the Palestinians, they're not allowed to use any of these aquifers because it is controlled by Israelis. About Gaza, all the water, the groundwater in Gaza is salinity, is suffering from salinity because overcharge. Before the Israelis go out from Gaza, they overcharge all the groundwater from Gaza, and the seawater is go down to the groundwater and polluted by salinity. About if we're talking about technical issue about the climate change effects in our area, I have just finished my research about the climate change in north of the West Bank, and we found from this one of these founds that the amount of rainfall is go down from 540 milliliter per year in Jenin area is go down to around 400 during the last 100 years. So we get data from last 100 years, and we found is keep steady state, go down as rainfall because of the climate change. So the Palestinians, they are suffering from the water use because of 2 reasons: from the climate, and we cannot we don't have water for agriculture, and we just have water for domestic, and this amount of water for domestic is not reached to the minimum of WHO, because Israelis they mentioned, okay, when there is not a lot of water rainfall during the year, so all the summer the Israelis, they cut water because the main source of the water is coming from Israel, because we're not allowed to drill any wells inside the West Bank or our water under our ground. So the problem in Palestine is in double problem because of the effects of climate change, in the same time the effects of the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So before we move ahead, last time in our last roundtable, there's a lot of questions about data, availability of reliable data, and I was wondering, has there been an attempt to quantify the socioeconomic impact of water scarcity and land degradation in any of the countries that are represented here today? If there's been any studies to quantify, I can see Nadim, you're nodding in. Yeah.
Sure. We actually did a study. I think I'll share in a bit the link for the World Food Program on the impact of climate change on rural livelihoods, how changes as the climate is changing or projected to change, what crops will be affected, who in the rural area would be affected. We looked at livelihood, how many people rely solely on agriculture, is it a multi-employer kind of setup, and we looked at all of this, and we identified in Lebanon areas that are sort of hotspots for this. And we also looked at, in another study for the International Water Management Institute, this will soon come out, we looked at the impact of climate-driven droughts or climate-originating droughts, how that would affect displacement. And we did a study on Lebanon and Jordan. And we interviewed in Lebanon about 11, we went through 11 villages, and in Jordan we went through about 9. And what the funny thing is, the common thing is, people did not associate, first of all, that the scarcity of water was not directly tied to climate. It was tied to mismanagement. So they point their finger at the authorities. And then the consequences, you would expect farmers who are not well-to-do anymore to up and leave. Some have done that, but the dominant group stayed behind. So we talked to our Jordanian friends and we asked them, why? And they said, well, we would think, and we saw this again in northern Syria, and this is through another meeting we had. They said, look, we are farmers, we've always farmed our land. We rely on, loans or getting a loan from a supplier and saying, look, we will give you half of our yield or whatever in exchange for, the inputs, agrochemicals and seeds and whatnot. So they expect a certain yield, but they get much less. So they pay much less and they are deeper in debt. And it goes on and it gets perpetuated, and they are so much in debt, they cannot leave. They either give over their land and do something else, or they stay in the land. And most loaners, the debtors, if we say, go along with them. In Lebanon, it's similar, but to a lesser extent. In Syria, in Deir ez-Zor, we traced 2 or 3 farmers who left. They were major landowners who had to give up their land because they owed so much, and they moved to Lebanon to farm as laborers. So this is you have an extent here that is important to realize. And we need to also realize that giving up on agriculture is not an option. It is wrong. We can say, yeah, what agriculture, it only contributes 2% to your GDP. Yeah, maybe 4%. But then what it does, if agriculture is, choked off, what do you do with the thousands of people and families that rely on the agri-food industry? Because agriculture is not only in production, it goes into the processing. And if you're not producing locally, the processing is going to be to shrink. So this is what we have to worry about, because these people will move to urban areas and demand different services where governments are incapable of providing these services. And they become good candidates for extremism. So the price is not direct financial cost. It is the general societal cost and national cost that we have to look at. Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll get back to those, but it's good to know that at least there are a couple of studies, and I think, Nadim, you should share those studies with the rest of the attendees here. Is there anything else being done in Sudan or Oman or Palestine on that front in terms of kind of quantifying the socioeconomic? Dr. Mohammed, I can see you want to come in.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think most of the collected data is in Sudan is concentrated on quantification of physical behavior of degradation on land and also scarcity of water. But of course, some general statement about the impacts in terms of social or economic dimension is stated, but not with clear statement and quantification. But still, I think that nowadays there is some concern in about from the public that about the land degradation, because some insurance companies, especially for agriculture and others, they are concerned about productivity of the land if the failure of cropping system is due to the natural one or laziness of the farmers themselves. So, and even this is related to some extent with the improvement of weather and climatic info that provided by meteorological authority in Sudan. So indeed, it is very important to make a quantification in terms of economic for these issues, land degradation and water scarcity, but it is not strong enough to be considered a coherent one. But in general, normally the physical identification and quantification of land degradation is always carried in studies. For instance, how is land degraded, the percentage, and it is a spatial distribution within the country. Most of the studies concern about that.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Ali, if I can see you want to add in.
Yes, maybe I can, I have no number right now, but I can say that it's around 80% of Oman is desert. So that's because of this and the lack of water, the farm, it's reduced, the most of the farm area is reducing, and that we are suffering from I can say the death of vegetation, and we are actually our dependence on drink water, on water desalination. So I think Oman now more than 90% use the water desalination. We have like in some area we have water, fresh water, but not that much. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we import most of the vegetable and other food stuff from the outside. So it's a really problem.
Thank you. Ayad, do you want to add anything on the data or quantification issue in Palestine?
David?
Yes. You can hear us?
No.
You can hear me?
No.
I think your connection is not great. We'll get back to you on that. So let's just move on. So just building. Hi, Ed. We cannot hear you. I think your connection is not correct. Ed, I'll suggest maybe you try to. Oh, we have lost him. Hopefully, will join us. Yeah. So, just want to move to the next item, which is, you read a lot of couple of reports that have come out recently from the UN, from the UNDP. There seems to be hinting that this problem is quite severe. That there's a danger that water scarcity and land degradation is likely going to drive internal and forced displacement and even conflicts in the region. Obviously, the only thing I could think of is, like what is happening right now with the Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, with the water dispute in that part of the world. But I'm sure there's more than that. So, if you want to have any thoughts on this question of, is there any relationship? Are we seeing any evidence of water problems and land degradation driving internal conflicts? To give it a go?
Well, I will start. Yes, really the land degradation and water scarcity, they are considered the main driver for a lot of problems in my country, namely internal displacement and conflict. Of course, there are other factors, but those two factors, they are the main. Because the local community, and especially in the rural areas, they are depend a lot on land and water for production of food, whatever this food is, crops or product from trees, and also of husbandry of livestock. So any changes, any severe changes in water resources will be definitely coupled with changes in land productivity, will force people to move to areas where they can find water and food. But as you know, still in Africa, that the land tenure system is somehow still traditional. Every tribe or group of people, they have their land, they have their, so maybe they are welcoming or not welcoming the newcomer, new people, new introducer, and of course this will create a tension and source of conflict between the dominant inhabitant and the newcomers. And this is the case in most of the country here, especially in areas of Kordofan and Darfur. And of course, as we mentioned in the previous roundtables, that at the end, the rural communities, when they face such bad and harsh condition, they move to the urban areas and live in marginal, like a shanty cities. And of course, this will make very strong society distortion for them, and of course will pressure the facility of the cities. So nowadays there is a lot of talk about ruralization of urban areas as a result of this. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not going to ask you to say anything about the ongoing Sudan-Ethiopia conflict. Maybe it's a little bit too sensitive. I feel like you've kind of skipped it, but we'll get back to that issue if there's time. Who wants to go next? Khalifa?
Okay. As Muhammad said, many people left their area and go to the urban area. Actually, lots of people in Oman as well, they left their farm and go to the urban area searching for new business, for new job. Why? Because farm needs more effort, need more money. There is no water, so they feel it's useless to take care about our farm or their farm, and then they move from their village to the urban area. Other things in Oman, some people, they left their farm for the foreign workers, and these workers, they don't care about actually what they have to plant on this farm. So they just use this farm maybe for just build a cottage, or use it like for the tourism purpose, but not for produce a product. So yeah, a lot of people, they left actually their farm.
But you don't see any cases of conflict in Oman as for instance was in Sudan. It's just basically internal migration.
No. For the conflict outside, no, we don't have. But we as I told you, we face that kind of problem. Many people just move from their village to the urban area.
All right, let's hear from Lebanon, and then we'll hear from Ed. It looks like we have him back. Yeah.
I can, excuse me, I can add a few cases. Look, the link, direct link between water and conflict, water land degradation and then conflict is tenuous. It's not been attached, even though viscerally, I think many of us feel that it is there, but we have to prove it.
Mhm.
What we have seen in one of our studies where we looked at drought and displacement, we talked to, I told you we visited 9 villages, I think, in southeastern Lebanon. And we were talking to people, you know, you're getting less and less flows out of this river. The reason the flow is reduced is that more wells are being pumped and the groundwater input into the river, which is basically your base flow, is being shot to hell. And more people are withdrawing water from the river itself. Plus snow, which feeds your groundwater, is erratic. So we said, how do you manage? And they said, well, we used to, you know, to water our sheep, we would go fill up a tanker, drive it up to the pasture, call in the sheep, and they would drink. Or sometimes they would fill up a tanker to fill water in their homes because the water utility is unable to supply them with water. Because this inability is due to lack of electricity, a breakdown in the network, etc. So we said, okay, that's fine. Any, you know, issues with conflict? And they first said, no, we're all brothers, because they're hosting a huge community of Syrians. We are all brothers, we are all, we love the land, blah, blah, blah. And then it started coming out that when tractors are driven to the watering hole, if you will, either, you know, it's a bend in the river to pump water. Sometimes, you know, Syrians would gang up on Lebanese drivers and prevent them from taking their turn. Or, you know, so people jump line. And this became an issue, and they would fight over water, access to water. And laborers, for example, a lot of Syrians come in that have good experience in working in the fields. This is nothing new to Lebanon. We always had migrant field workers. But now the expansion of migration not only ate into agriculture, but into carpentry, working with metals, working with electricians, etc., mechanics, all of those, you know, there's now competition. This has raised tension. So that's one issue that's problematic. Now, most recently, within the past 10 days, there's been a huge outbreak of cholera in northern Syria. It made the news about 10 days. And this is slowly trickling down into northern Lebanon. And we in Lebanon, you know, this has become an issue. People are saying now, who would formerly have said, do not close the border, now are saying, no, we have to close the border. One epidemic is enough. We don't need another one. And at one point, you know, cholera was endemic in Syria and in parts of northern Lebanon. Now they don't want that. So this is now heightening tension, not between the refugees and the people, maybe there is some, but between authorities, local authorities and donors. Donors want to keep the borders open, everything is hunky-dory, we love each other, we have to take in people, all that. And the local communities say, no, we don't want them. We don't want you to force them on us because we don't want cholera. And this is what's happening. So these are localized examples. We can get into issues about transboundary waters, etc., but I don't know if you want to do that now, or we can do that.
Yeah, we have that item coming up because we're going to be discussing some element of regional water diplomacy and so on. Ed, good to have you back. You can hear us? You are muted. Ed, you're muted. Do you want to unmute yourself? No, looks like it's trouble here.
Yeah, Thabit.
Yeah, good to have you back. I think you were muted just a few minutes ago.
Okay, I want to explain to you before I start my talk to say I am so sorry because I am driving, because the situation in Palestine now is very bad. The security is very bad in the roads. So I try to reach my home before the Israelis cut the roads and I cannot reach my home. So
Yeah.
I am so sorry for all the participants because I am with you in my car. About degradation, Thabit, we face a big problem in Palestine because, as you know, we don't have any control in the about water resources. In the same time, the climate change, the amount of the rainfall in our area is go down. And when you want to make water harvesting, is very hard for the farmers to making these things. In the same time, about the conflict, the Israelis, they have policy to let the people leave their land, agriculture land. What they are doing, they give a big salaries for the Palestinians to working there. So the Palestinians said, why I spend all my time in my land with my family, and in the same time I can go to Israel and get more money and my family stay at the home. This is one thing. The other things, they did that because they want to control the land. After we not use this land as Palestinian, according to Uthmani law, they use Uthmani law. If you not use it many years, this land, they come by military law and put their hand in the lands. So now, we before the Palestinian depend in agriculture around 20% in their economic sector. But now we reach around 2 to 30% of the Palestinian income is coming from agriculture. So this is the situation.
Thanks, Ed. And I just want to say that we appreciate you taking all the troubles to join us. But I think you, if you're rushing to beat the security patrol, I think you better do that, because I mean, this roundtable is important, but we want you alive next time. So I suggest don't risk so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. So let's move to the other item. So there's a lot of stories that, you know, the problem is getting out of control, and I've been reading some pieces, and people are saying that water scarcity and land degradation is changing, you know, land governance and how water and land are governed in the region. So it will be nice to hear if these are the kind of things you kind of observing in your countries, that, you know, water governance, land governance is sort of like changing because of this problem that we're discussing. And we'll start with Sudan.
Okay, thank you. I think that land governance in Sudan is governed by Land Act, which is dated back to the British colony system, but it underwent a lot of development, so that the last one after 19, I think, 85, there is some concern customary laws. In general, that the laws itself, it always introduced or endorsed by the government with less or little concern about the local communities. But as a result of conflict that raised during the last period as a result of land degradation, and also in addition to the new investor that they came outside the region from at the national and international level, which is known as land grabbing. So there's some development in a land governance system. Nowadays, there is a lot of concern about the willing of the local communities about using their homeland. So now, even in some states, that there is a very clear development that the land should be shared between government and local communities, which is considered to be a sort of recognition of local community willing to take some benefits from their land. In regard to the water issue, of course, the water governance system in Sudan, to some extent, it is fragmented. Each sector, as a user of the water, they have their roles and rules as well and regulations. But in general, there is some linkage between land and water, especially for the groundwater. Whenever you have the land, you have the right to use the groundwater, for example. But still, I think the development in the water sector in regard of water governance is still weak, and it needs more coordination and more collaboration between different water users. As you know, the water is used by agriculture, also for domestic use and so on. So in general, the water governance, it doesn't witness good development like the land governance system in Sudan. The good news that also that there is some concern about land itself. So maybe as a sort of solving conflict and make a resolution, in many states that there is land commission, and they looking for finding ways to solve problem between people as a result of conflict on the land resources. And more or less, as you know, in Africa in general, the dignity of people is prone to land. If you have a land, then you have you have all things. But if you lose the land, then you will lose your dignity. So there is good nowadays, I think, as a result of this conflict and these problems, really, there is good understanding of importance of introducing an efficient and useful land governance system.
Okay, so a mix of good and bad news
Thank you.
in Sudan. Thanks a lot, Dr. Mohammed. Is land and water scarcity changing how land and water is governed in Lebanon or Oman or Palestine? Nadim?
In Lebanon, it's not really changed that much. The awareness of the need to be greener, if you will, in construction, and the end result, not the process of construction or the licensing of, building, encroaching into other lands, is forcing, for example, urban areas to have rooftop harvesting, renewable energy sources, etc. More and more people in rural areas are reverting to older practices of rainwater harvesting. Most homes in the mountains in Lebanon used to have a cistern underneath the house or next to the house that would fill up during the spring period, early summer, from a rising water table. So it goes in, fills the cistern, and then in winter, this is augmented by capturing rain from the rooftop and directed in there. During the expansions of the 70s, 80s, into the 21st century, people did away with that. And now they are realizing, oops, we need to get back to that. So it is slowly finding its way into regulations, building code, etc., or regular practice. The issue with land degradation, and I forgot to mention one which is critical here, is the proliferation of quarries, sand quarries and rock quarries. And the way that these have been permitted was unbelievable. It's obnoxious. During the war, it was grab and lie to the permit issuers, etc. And large tracts of mountainous areas have been totally consumed, if you will, by these quarries. And this has, in many instances, maybe I will share in a little bit, I have a collage of a picture of a quarry that's filled up with water. Maybe I'll post it once I dig it up. Yeah. It is affecting our groundwater. It is because our land is karstic. And when quarrying occurs, they use dynamite on large scale. It propagates cracks into the groundwater from the surface. So the linkage becomes direct, and any pollution on the surface then gets into the subsurface. So these are issues that are, dominant, and quarrying is now being challenged by environmental organizations, civil society. People are becoming more and more empowered, and the government is really being cornered into taking action, because the owners of these quarries are extremely powerful money-wise, which means politically as well. So I'll stop here. Once I get the picture, I'll signal you, Tabit, and maybe I can share it with you all.
Yeah, that would be good. But it's good to know that, this problem is already changing how land is governed. It's changing building codes and behavior, and people going to old practices. Khalifa, you want to share some thoughts from Oman?
Yes, actually the governments here in Oman try to raise the awareness regarding the water problem and land degradation. So they encourage people to reduce using water. They said use it water when it's necessary. And they announced some measures, like they stop well drilling in some area, and they stop farming some projects if this project use a lot of water, and they encourage people to import some projects from Iran, from India, and even from Lebanon, if it's that's kind of projects need a lot of water. So they announced these measures, and if you need to make a well or drilling a well, you have to get authority from the government. Otherwise, you will get in trouble, because this thing is by law.
Right. Thanks. We'll let, Iyad, we'll let you follow unless you're kind of comfortable to chip in. But otherwise, you're just happy to follow, I guess. We'll let you drive.
Yes, I can have my introduction here about this issue. In Palestine, about rain water harvesting, we have a lot of projects in this issue. This projects is coming from international fund. In the same time, most of the house in Palestine, they have their cisterns, because the water is not continuous, the source of the water. I give you example, like in the south, in Hebron, the water reach to the houses maybe in summer. If the summer is very hard, it's coming one by month to each house. So they now by law from the municipality, each building should have their cisterns. They should have one in their houses. In the same time, like in the middle areas in Ramallah, the cost of 1 cubic meter of water is around $1.5 US, the cost. And in the same time, the municipality forced the building owners to build their cisterns in their building. So and it is and it is available now in the Palestinian Water Authority strategy. You can find it because we have the body who regulate the water resources in Palestine, Palestinian Water Authority. And they put the policy, strategy, and action plan, and they have under this authority national company. This national company is responsible for reach the water to the citizens. So they put in their strategy, every building, every house should have cisterns, water harvesting for the summer situation, because as you know, we don't have any access to the water resources.
Thanks, Ed. So we move to the question which kind of has been popping up here and there, that a lot of water resources in the region are sort of transboundary water resources, and there's a question of regional diplomacy and regional cooperation. I suppose this is such a burning issue in places like Sudan because of what is happening with the dam construction in neighboring Ethiopia. But I'm sure there could be other cases. Are we seeing any regional initiatives, whether it's through the Arab League or the UN? Is there anything going on that front? Or if you want me to rephrase the question, if it's not very clear.
Well, I think it is very clear. Of course, especially for Sudan, you know that the River Nile system is a transboundary system in which the Sudan sharing benefits with other countries, especially in the east one with Ethiopia, and in the west-south parties with Uganda and other countries, and South Sudan itself. So in general, to take care and manage of these water resources, it needs, of course, a sort of cooperation and collaboration between countries. Historically, there is a Nile initiative, the Nile Basin Initiative, and in this initiative, most of the countries in upstream and downstream, they come together and discuss about using of water and development project in the upstream and downstream. Of course, nowadays there is a big issue that is GERD, the GERD in Ethiopia. Now it is one of the issues need a lot of cooperation. Always there is some talks and some meeting about this issue, and of course it cannot be solved, or it cannot be done in a way that benefit for all the countries unless there is some sort of collaboration and cooperation. I think this issue is somehow related to the political issues as well. As you know, that when agreement or in diplomacy, it mostly affected by the relation between countries, but it's still this development project in the Ethiopia that GERD has, of course, has a positive and negative impact on the river system, and it should be undertaken and should be considers, and also it requires a lot of cooperation between countries, especially at operational level, because maybe you know or not that the dam is very near, the GERD dam is very near to the established dam in Sudan, Roseris, and it is only 4 hours to have water from GERD to Roseris dam. So if there is no cooperation, especially at operational level, this will lead to serious problem for the country. This issue, I think, it is now under a lot of discussion between the worker in the field of water and there is a lot of negotiation and research, and hopefully that all these negotiation will end up with a good benefit for the all countries, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt. On the other hand, I think that in our country, Sudan, there also is a need for concern about transboundary issues related to the groundwater, because in the north part of the Sudan, there is a great lake of underground or groundwater shared between Sudan, Egypt, Libya, and Chad. So there is a real need for cooperation and diplomatic negotiation and collaboration, because the abstraction level at some countries is so much. So this may affect the sustainability of this important water resource for the whole countries. It is not a secret that which is known as Great River in Libya is taking water from this aquifer. So of course, no one can say that no one can prevent other countries to take the water for the benefit of their people. But of course, this requires a sort of cooperation and co-benefit for the whole countries. Otherwise, this will make some, I can say very frankly, can make some bad feeling for some countries, and maybe they think that there is a sort of exploitation of their resources, and in a manner that cannot provide future opportunity for the next generation.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mohammed. So, and it's good that you're saying it's more than just groundwater; it's also underground water resources as well. Nadim, and then we go to Khalifa.
Okay. Look, the look at if you approach water relationships between neighboring countries and co-riparians, it is quite complex. On the one hand, you've got international, I don't know if you want to call it international law, but there is a UN convention on the use of non-navigable rivers. And this is something that is, to some extent, a fair representation of access to water. It gives rights to those that have had prior access. It gives rights to those that have the source of the water. It gives, it sort of doesn't satisfy anybody. So that's why it could be fair. But what we are witnessing in this part of the world is something called, there is no hydro diplomacy by any stretch. It's all hydro hegemony. If you look at what's happening now in Iraq, for example, Iraq is suffering through a sort of natural drought. It occurs, fine. But the reaction of Turkey and Iran with respect to the Tigris and the Euphrates and the tributaries that are in there has deprived the Iraqis of water. That is in contravention of agreements that were in place. Iraq, being militarily less powerful than its two neighbors, can do nothing. The same with northern Syria. Northern Syria is also suffering from a drought, and Turkey has decided, you know what, for political and other reasons, they cut off water from the Kurdish region, and people have been suffering immensely there. Then you come down to the Jordan River. Jordan starts in Yarmouk in Syria, southern Syria, and in Lebanon. And it joins down to become a dam and then flows down into the Dead Sea. The Oslo Agreement and associated deals with that diverted the Jordan into Lake Tabaraya, or the Sea of Galilee, which would fill it up and then Jordan then has access to some of that water. If you look at the agreement, it is on a personal basis so that people will not be upset with who I represent. This is a sham. Jordan, for the past year or two, has been buying its water from Israel. And there's no way they can do anything. Lebanon, where we have the headwater of the Jordan, through an informal agreement back in the 50s, brokered by a Hollywood agent between Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Israel on the division of water, we get less than, I would say, we would get about 10 to 15% of the water that's starting here. And that's, a nod in the wind, and, let that be. When Lebanon was occupied by Israel, Lebanese farmers in southern Lebanon could not drill wells because there are common aquifers that run between Lebanon and northern Palestine. And that if you drill too much, you might tilt the hydraulic gradient and lower the water table and get, they will not, the inhabitants of northern Israel will not get any water. So that was stopped. Lebanon had an agreement with Syria that was signed during Syria's occupation of Lebanon, which was not a fair agreement for Lebanon. It evolved into something that is getting near to be fair, but it's not. The major part, though, that was missed and that was touched upon later is the groundwater issue. Groundwater and surface water are connected. And we often, consider water out of sight, out of mind. That is not right. So the agreement between Lebanon and Syria is over the Orontes, which is a river that flows northwards through Syria into Turkey, into the Mediterranean. We agreed, we divvied up the flows, very ambiguous agreement. And then nobody talked about groundwater. And when Lebanese farmers started drilling for water within the catchment of the Orontes and beyond it, the Syrian army came in and intervened. That's when they had a physical presence. This has changed, but what is happening now is that the Syrian farmers are drilling a lot of wells inside their region, pumping out water, dropping down the water table. We are not able to access as much as we want, and Lebanese farmers are at a disadvantage. Between Lebanon and Syria, there is a groundwater, there is an aquifer that crosses anti-Lebanon range, which is the mountain range between Lebanon and Syria, and feeds what we call the Anjar Springs. It's a wetland. The spring water is used for irrigation and water supply, and the water table rises so much it just is a continuous wetland. The Syrian government drilled wells in the area that is no man's land and started pumping. The springs drew down, the water table drew down, and the springs flow became problematic. There is not much of a recourse there. They are more powerful, they do what they want. And diplomacy has to come in at some point, but since leaving Lebanon, Syria got mired in its own war. The war in Syria or on Syria, whatever you want to call it, is really affecting Lebanon in many ways. And last but not least, the Kabir River, which is the boundary between Lebanon and Syria, they had a very good agreement between the two countries, brokered by the UN. That's why it was more or less fair. However, now with cholera rearing its ugly head, it's a problem. And there's no agreement on the quality there. So there is not much put in on quality. Most of what the agreements are being addressed, they tackle mostly quantity. And this is something that has to be redressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadim. Khalifa, you want to jump in?
Actually, I have no things to add in this point, but maybe I can say all our neighbor country located in desert area. We have no river. Actually, most of our area is desert, and most of them is use the water desalination, and most of the country have coastal area and have a lot of water desalination station. So we are okay, and maybe we have some agreements to exchange the agricultural products, but we have no issues in this things.
Iyad, anything on diplomacy, or if you want to say that?
Yes, Thabit. I want to focus about the transboundary, Dr. Thabit. When we're talking about the transboundary, we're talking about water and wastewater in the same time in Palestine, not just about water, fresh water or groundwater. The second point, as you know, and all my colleagues know, there is no borders about the water or environmental issue. Our problem with the Israelis, as Dr. Nadeem mentioned, who own the power, who can control about the water resources. Here in Palestine, as you know, we live in the upper stream, and the Israelis, they are in the downstream. So all the recharged water is coming from Palestine for the ground. Not access to this water, they by military power control about water in I give you, and I like Dr. Nadeem is the head of Palestinian team for the Joint Water Committee with the Israelis. And one time of this meeting, the Israelis mentioned if the Lebanese build a pipeline in the upper stream, they will destroy it by their plans. Just to see how is their mentality, how they control in every drop water in the area. The Israelis now, they are the best country in desalination, and they have enough water. They have a lot of water, and they don't need the groundwater. So but all the time they consider all the area as consumer. So they mention to Palestinian, to Jordanian, to Egyptian, to anybody, you need water. We don't have any problem, but you take it as consumer, and you don't have any right in the water resources, groundwater or the transboundary water. For this reason, they sell water now for the Jordanians, and they sell water for the Palestinian, and nobody talking about the rights of the people in this water. This is the situation in our region about the transboundary.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So I think that the message is very clear that the need for diplomacy, the need for regional cooperation, it's very paramount. So we're wrapping up.
Jacob, I want to add a very little point that sure. I think that in the region itself, not only diplomacy, but also there is a need for internal judgment or internal new practices regarding the land itself and water. For instance, in Sudan, most of the people, because they are, especially for people those live near to the river, they believe that they have no problem with water. They believe that because they every day during their daily walk, they see the Nile, they see the water moving, so they don't have that great concern about the problem of water, and therefore they are not use the water in an efficient way. So the need for water use efficiency, that's the introduction, and actually I that to promote or encourage people to use water in efficient ways, the water use efficiency. It is a very important term, and it is very important practice that to get benefit of available water. You know that in some countries that the use of water the use of water efficiency is very high. Even you cannot wash your hand with flowing water from the it comes as drop by drop, so that you use the water in a very efficient way. But in the most of the countries in the Middle East or Near East, they behave with water in a very lazy way. And even this not only at the personal level or at domestic level. If you go also to the water use in the agriculture sector, there is no good management of water so that they can get benefit. What I want to say actually is that the countries themselves not only to get negotiation with others or with the diplomatic war to relay the problem on the others, but also we have to improve. We have to improve our water use efficiency, and this also is very important regarding the land use. In the countries that the people themselves they treat the land as unwell, like unwell citizens. They can die for because they are someone want to take their land, but when they have this land, they treated it in a very bad way. So the land use efficiency is a very important issue that the countries in the region they need some sort. Also, finally, I think that because the water uh, is very important. Actually, even the land itself can be managed. Even if there is no land, you can, to some extent, especially for agriculture, you can produce food, but the water. So here also that in I can talk about Sudan, maybe the other countries they have a different view, but there is a lack of integration. So there is a need for adoption of integrated water resource management. So as I said in regarding the water governance in Sudan, it is very fragmented. Every user of water, they think of water as it is own, without any concern about others users, and this make a lot of problem. If we, for instance, if we thinking about water as a source of power, hydropower. So the people who are looking for irrigation, they just want water for agriculture. They don't concern or they don't quantify the need of water for production of hydropower. So water use efficiency, land use efficiency, improvement of coordination, they are very important issues need to be tackled and considered in our region in general. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's a very good point. Like you say, it has to do with, behavior changes, and also internal measures, not just regional diplomacy, but, country specific measures to ensure that water resources are used efficiently. Unless there's anybody want to add anything on that, we kind of wrapping up. I have a kind of a tricky question. You may choose to say something, or you may choose to skip it if you like, because we are approaching the annual climate summit, the United Nations Conference of Parties, as they call it, COP27 this year is in Egypt. It's in next month. By the look of things, it looks like the couple of topics that are going to be like the most dominant topic. That's my view. I think things like climate finance, climate justice, issues of adaptation, energy transition, I think those are going to be like the key issues. And maybe there's a danger of issues like land degradation and water to be a little bit sidelined. That's how I feel. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts for those delegates who are going to Sharm el Sheikh in November. What should they discuss about water scarcity and land degradation? Because there is a danger that this issue could be sidelined. That's the kind of feeling I have. I could be completely wrong here, of course. But I'll just want to get your thoughts, because we cannot avoid this question, and we have the COP next month. If you want to start.
Yes, maybe I'll ask them for more fund for research in the field of water. I think, in my opinion, the research it's good for our country to discover new technique for getting water, like maybe fog fishing, maybe. or maybe recycling wastewater, need more funding for research. Maybe they can make centers for research in this field. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Funding for research. Nadim,
Yeah.
what would you tell these delegates up there in Egypt next month?
I wouldn't call it conference of the parties. It's the parties at the conference.
Okay, that's
Most
right.
likely. It is a lot of, I'm not very enamored with these big meetings because it's just a lot of things that you rubber stamp there. There are some negotiations that go on, but the real bulk of the work is being done over the summer before. So the issue with finance that I want to touch upon and justice, we talked about them in our discussions here. When we look at, justice in terms of climate justice, whether it's climate or environmental justice and what's happening, we are looking for justice not for amongst, the horizontal timeline justice amongst our peers, nation to nation, community to community, etc. This is truly important, yes, but the justice we truly seek is the justice for the coming generations. And for this to happen, we really need to think more and more about how we access and use our resources and how we finance projects that oftentimes hurt our ability to survive and be just to the others. For example, pipelines across in the US, in areas that have been pristine and not used to oil and gas. Why are we pushing oil and gas while renewables we know are what is needed and is the future for us? In terms of water resources, why do we keep abusing this resource? Imagine, I want to give examples, and it's going to be nasty a little bit. What's the water consumption in the UAE or Saudi Arabia? Compare that to the US. They're close. They're very close in the amount of water they use. And what water are these two countries using? Forget the US. These two countries are using fossil water or treated water, desalinated water that is treated using fossil fuel, which is where you are producing a lot of greenhouse gases. Why do we need to have huge swimming pools in our homes in KSA or UAE or Kuwait, etc.? And why do we need those? Well, we know that that water is not going to be available for other generations. So this is what I want. I want us to start looking inwards. When we originally talked, it's not only across borders or across communities. It's, like Michael Jackson says, it starts with a man in the mirror, right? So it does start with us. And we need to understand how to fix that. This then we can take out to the COP and say, look, guys, we are doing our utmost to preserve our water, not to use fossil fuel. We are reusing water. We are relying on renewables. The onus now is on you. You, being the industrialized countries, have to, shape up and do the right thing. So this is what I would like to do. Stand on solid ground by doing the right thing at home, and then go. I will not say kick ass, but I did say kick ass up at the conference.
Thanks, Nadim, and I totally share your frustrations. I'm a veteran of 5 COPs myself. I used to be very enthusiastic in the early days, not so much these days, so I totally understand that. By the way, I should say that the COP this year is sponsored by Coca-Cola, which is one of the world's biggest water users. And as you can imagine, that has not gone down very well.
And plastic user? Plastic?
Absolutely, and plastic as well. So that has not gone down very well. Mohammed, you have any thoughts about those who will be in Egypt? Dr. Mohammed, you can hear us? We're having trouble with Dr. Mohammed. Let's go to Iyad and then we'll get back to Dr. Mohammed.
Okay, Tabit, thank you. I think we need to talk about research and technology. If we're talking about climate change and we want to have adaptation, we should be prepare ourselves for the next generation. And I think we are very weak in our area about research in climate change and in technology. So I think if we can focus in how can we support the academy and the research in climate change, at the same time, how can we start to transfer the knowledge and knowledge about the technology to cope with these problems about climate change.
Thanks, Iyad. Dr. Mohammed, we have you back.
Yes. I actually am always concerned about the internal issues, the negotiator themselves from the region. In general, I was being in a COP 2 times. So in all this, I know what I noticed that there is no real linkage between researcher and academic institutions with negotiator. They just make in general without their thought and discussion is without any support from academic arena. And this is make really the discussion itself and negotiation itself to some extent is not supported by I want to say not supported by good experience from the academia, and this makes the negotiation itself is very weak. If we compare the negotiator came from the other countries, especially from the first or developed countries, they have a very good support from their institutions. But here in the region, there is a real big gap between negotiator and the people who are concerned by negotiation and the research institution. Regarding the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, they know they have a concern about a lot about mitigation effort. So by this window, the land degradation issue in many cases can be tackled and can be considered because they looking for reduction of high reflectance of sunlight from the land. So whenever you have some project to afforestation and others, they are welcoming that. But when you come to the problems that concern about the people themselves to adapt to the climate change, they are very reluctant. And as I mentioned in the previous roundtable, you need a lot of work and effort to have a fund for adaptation. So it's still that maybe that can be linked with climate justice and environmental justice. There is need for some a great effort from the negotiation from the region to develop and improve ways for climate finance, especially for adaptation issues. I think also nowadays there is a lot of talk about loss and damage according to the Warsaw Agreement and Warsaw Protocol, I think. And this part somehow can be linked to issues of land degradation, because land degradation at the end, it is reduction in biological productivity of land, which at the end will lead to food insecurity and shortage and internal displacement and immigration. And all these issues to some extent should be by way or another integrated in the negotiation effort, so that the countries that really affected by climate change now, the developing countries, and I think that the developed countries now they start to find ways to survive. because they have knowledge, they have finance, but for developing countries, under these conditions, one day they will face a real problem with climate change. And I have a friend of mine that they said one day that even the developed countries, they will not work a lot about climate change because they now working in technology and ways to live within the changes, within the changing climate now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mar. I think a very good point there about the collaboration between country negotiators and academia, because I think it's the academics who do research and they know these problems much better than the negotiators. So really good point there. Well, we have come to the end of the third and final roundtable. Thanks very much for being part of this 3 series of roundtables. As I said in the beginning, all of these roundtables are recorded, and you can always go back to the GLD YouTube page you can share the link with your friends and sit back and watch again. And as I've said, the policy brief have been produced. One is already out, both in English and Arabic, and the rest of the 2 will be coming up. I thanks the delegates very much. Oh, panelists. Some people had meetings here, so when I say delegate, it feels like you're already in the COP. and you definitely not. So you want to say a word or two?
Just to thank the panelists for the great insight. These series have been very informative. I know that people listening to you all from Egypt have been very, very interested in following this series. So thank you so much, and thank you GLD for working with us on this. Thabit, Ghadir, Ellen, thank you all. This was really, really, really very, very, very a really, really great pleasure for APS.
Thanks. So just before I bring in Gadia, I just want to say that last week we were told that there are people all the way from Idaho in the US who have been following these roundtables. So there's been quite a lot of interest in these discussions. Gadia, who has been doing a lot of the work, emailing you, and Gadia, if you have any thoughts and a few words.
Just want to say thank you everybody for working on this series, and I'm looking forward for working with you again in the future on other projects. So yeah, thank you all.
Thanks again. So on behalf of GLD and APS, we wish you well, and hopefully this is just the beginning of more collaborations in the future. And Gadia will get back to all of you and kind of like, institutional specific issues that you have to sort out. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.